Hello everyone, I've got a Ford Focus here, 07 plate. It needs a Cambelt replacement. I've done a Cambelt replacement on these cars before and I actually made a video about it, and I'll sort of like link that in the description and up here as well so you can see that. But I'm not going to do a Cambelt change today on video, but I was going to show you something because I've done about 5 or 6 Cambelt changes on these Focuses in the last 2 weeks. And there's a common thing with every single one of them that I found. The bloody crankshaft bolt is tight. It's really tight. And I've got a US Pro air gun here, and we've got a flipping good compressor. And this gun, although it's not an expensive gun, it's pretty damn powerful and hasn't really let me down. And flipping heck, it cannot undo these bolts. It's an 18mm crankshaft bolt and it will not undo them. So I'm going to show you my quick tip to undoing them. I've showed this before on other videos on the Mondeos, but if you've got a Focus and you're changing your cam belt and you're struggling to undo your crankshaft bolt, then I'll show you a nice easy way to get it out. I'm going to be replacing the water pump as well at the same time as changing the cam belt. So at the bottom left hand corner of the radiator you've got a drain bung, so I shall undo that. Hopefully it will undo, yes. And I'll drain the water out so all the water doesn't pour out all over the engine when I take the water pump off. I have removed the expansion cap off the water bottle at the top so as to let gravity in so the water comes out in one nice stream. Right, before I attempt to undo this crankshaft bolt, I've got a laser timing toolkit here, which all I really need is this pin which screws into the bottom of the block and this setting bar which goes on the back of the camshafts. I'll just go over this very quickly, although I'm not going to do the full cam belt change here. You'll turn the crankshaft over and the camshafts over until your camshafts are almost in line. You can get them 180 degrees out. If 180 degrees out, the bar won't fit into the back of the slots. But if you can see that the bar is going to go into the slots, turn the camshafts round till they're just a little bit before the bar can actually go in. The reason for that is I want the crankshaft to lock onto the crankshaft setting pin first. So I get that pin, and I've already taken the 10mm bolt out of here. So you undo that and take that bolt out, then you put your timing pin in. It's a little bit tight for room down here. I'm going to screw that in. I don't know if we can see that, yeah. I'll screw that and make sure it goes all the way in and flush. You haven't got to tighten it up or nothing, just finger tight. So that's our crankshaft locking pin in place. So it's an 18mm socket on your crankshaft bolt, and I'm going to turn this crankshaft over clockwise until we can feel the actual crankshaft hit on that locking pin, and hopefully the camshafts should align up and that bar should slot straight in. Right, so here goes. That's now firmly on our locking pin, and over here where our camshafts are both lined up on the slots, that bar should, with any luck, just slot straight in. Yep, that's absolutely perfect. This is the original cam belt on this car, so this was put on at the factory, so you would assume that the camshafts were lined up properly anyway. So that's good, at least we know the timing is perfect to start with. So this is it. Now I'm going to attempt to remove this crankshaft bolt, 18mm. The gun, the actual air compressor is primed and fully charged up. So I don't know if I can get a bit more light on that. There. Okay. Shit, just dropped the socket. So yeah, that bolt is not coming out. The thing is, these bolts, unlike the Ford Mondeo Mark V, these bolts do not have Loctite on them, whereas the Mark V Mondeo crank bolts do. But what these bolts do have is, I think they're what's called stretch threads. So once they're put in, they stretch a bit and they're in ever so tight. And once you take them out, you have to replace them. But here's the problem, I need to get the bolt out. This car is an automatic as well. So even, well, who has the tool to take the starter motor out and put a locking plate in the flywheel to lock the flywheel? And you could undo the crank bolt with a bar and socket. It'd have to be probably a long bar to undo it. I mean, these days, when you've got battery operated guns and air tools, you don't need to do all that. So the nice easy way of getting that bolt out is to put some heat on it. And this Titan is, you know, like the Black & Decker paint strippers, wallpaper strippers, this sort of thing. You can use this, and I would say you should put it on full power and put the gun up against it about a couple inches away from the bolt and hold it there for about 3 to 5 minutes at the most. I will show you something else once I get this bolt out as well. But anyway, I'm going to switch this on. So that's on full power now. And I'm going to put that there, and I'll now hold it, and I'll wait for about 3 or 4 minutes, and I'll see if that bolt comes undone. Okay, that's been a good 4 minutes now, so let's give it a try. Bingo, straight away. 4 minutes of heat, and that's done it. There. And I should think that's pretty damn hot. I'm not going to touch it, but yeah, you can see the smoke coming off it. Right, do you know something? It's my lucky day, unfortunately. In this case, I would rather the pulley be tight. Every pulley I've taken off lately has been bloody tight, apart from this one. This one is actually spinning as free as a dicky bird. But normally we have, unless you've got like a two-legged puller or something like that, you can actually fix onto there with a socket in the middle so you can draw the pulley off. You can use like a slide hammer, and we'd normally get a slide hammer in there like that and whack it, and then sort of like move the slide hammer to another point and then whack it until it comes off. But obviously in this case it was loose anyway, which is surprising because they're normally quite tight. Anyway, there's our pulley off. That pulley's hot as well, so I've got a piece of rag holding it. Right, I just want to point something out here. This bolt I've just taken out of the crankshaft. In your new, like I've got a Gates kit here, you'll get a packet with probably 3 different size crank bolts in it. And obviously this is the one I need. Some of these Focuses have this length crank bolt, which is a hell of a lot longer, and I had to remove one of these, and 4 to 5 minutes was not enough. I ended up being more like nearly 8 or 9 minutes of heat on this before I could undo this bolt. Obviously it's much longer, so it takes a lot longer to get the heat down the bolt to actually free it. So just in case your bolt isn't coming out straight away, and you can't really tell what bolt you've got in your crankshaft until you take it out. So I don't know, actually that one, the head of that one is a bit thicker than this one, but all the same, that longer bolt does take a lot longer to get out. Anyway, I know I said I wasn't going to actually go through the whole Cambelt replacement. I'll just show a few pointers anyway. This is like a floating tensioner, so you can get the little lever underneath it and you can lift that up and that will loosen the belt anyway, so you can pull the belt off quite easily, and that's it. This belt's done like 82,000 miles, so it's not great. It's starting a hairline crack, but yeah, it would have probably done the full amount. I mean, these belts do about 125,000 miles, I think their interval is. But because this car is going to be a rental, so we want to make sure it's actually okay now and replaced before it actually goes out on rent. The other thing I'm going to say, Whenever you change these belts, now I've taken it off, that bottom sprocket will just spin freely. That's how it's supposed to be. We'll make sure that the crankshaft is definitely butted up against the timing pin down there when we put the new belt on. These two camshaft sprockets, if you were to try and, I mean, some people might not take the rocker cover off and think you can just put the belt on as is and not line up the camshafts. You can probably just paint mark these, but what will probably happen is if you paint mark these against the rocker cover, there's a high chance that the belt will be half a tooth out, in which case it's not going to be right. So the best thing to do here is to actually loosen both these bolts. There's a 21mm nut on the camshaft you can hold with a spanner, and a 13mm on the sprocket. So we can now loosen that. So now our pulley's nice and free, and we'll do that the same with the other side. Now both our sprockets are loose, I know the cam belt's going to go on properly and in place. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to whip this tensioner pulley off, get the water pump off, which is just a bunch of 8mm screws. Be careful with them because you can get a case where one of these bolts can be tight coming out. So anyway, I'll get this water pump changed and get the new belt on. Then I'm going to show you, once we get it all back together, I'm going to show you how to bleed the cooling system, because this could save you a lot of time. Before I put the water pump on, normally when I get these Gates kits, they'll have like a metal crush fit gasket, which I really like. I don't put no sealant on them at all. They just go straight on and crush up. This gasket, as sometimes you'll get a paper gasket in the Gates kit. I don't know why they do that, but when I get a paper gasket, because I don't trust them, I use this Wins black gasket maker. I put that on the gasket as well, just to make sure. So we're almost ready to put our belt back on. I'm going to get a little like pad, little rough pad. I can just scour that crankshaft with, just in case, because they normally get a little bit rusty. So if you can just clean the crank up a little bit, and also the actual pulley that's going to go onto the crank, this main pulley here, that's normally a problem getting off, I'll clean that up in there as well. And I'll put a very, very thin smear of grease in here, so hopefully it won't seize up again, even though this one wasn't seized up. But most of them that you have to take off, they are stuck on quite tight. So that belt will just drop onto there, put it on the crankshaft sprocket first. It will go around the tensioner, and then you can fit it onto the inlet camshaft first, and then wrap it round onto the exhaust camshaft. So I'm just trying to do this in one hand, but there. So that's it, we're on. And just make sure the belt is like in the centre of the sprockets. And what we do now, there's a little pin here that comes with our new tensioner. We just pull that off, because you see how sloppy it is here. We'll pull that pin out, and now it's tight. I didn't tighten this tensioner bolt up, even though it doesn't really matter, but now I'm going to tighten it up. And now I'm going to put a spanner on our camshafts, on each camshaft, just here where the nut is. It's 21mm, and I'm going to tighten our camshaft nut bolts. All we really want to do now is make sure that our crankshaft is butted up against our timing pin correctly. So you can put a pair of mole grips on the crankshaft, just be careful, and I use a piece of rag so I don't damage the crankshaft. But you see, I can turn the crankshaft, you see, but as I turn it clockwise, it butts up against the crank pin like that, so I know we're in place properly. And that's our cam belt all in place, tensioned up nicely. And over here our camshafts are slotted, well, our bar is slotted into our camshafts, so we know everything is timed up perfectly. So all I've really got to do now is put the bottom cover on and whack the crankshaft pulley bolt in with the pulley back on. Before I put this pulley back on, I'm just going to blow this thread out in the crankshaft just in case there's any swarf in there. And now we shall slide our pulley on. I put a very thin smear of grease in that pulley as well, so to help it. Come on. There, that's fully in. Now I shall screw our bolt in a few threads, make sure it's started properly. The last thing you'd ever want to do is cross thread one of these. And now I'll whack it up quickly. Now, I'm not tightening up fully of the air gun just yet because it's hitting up against the crankshaft timing pin, so I'm going to remove that pin now. So I don't want it crankshaft pushed against the pin and maybe damage it or anything like that. So now I'll whack this up with the air gun properly on full power. And that's it. I don't bother torquing the crankshaft pulley bolt up. The reason for that is I don't see how you're going to do it unless you've got the actual tool to fit in where the starter motor is. And I don't fancy taking the starter motor out. So I shall remove our setting plate at the back of the camshafts, and now all I have to do is rotate the engine over 2 full revolutions, put the timing pin back in and hope that that camshaft plate aligns as well. So I'll give that a try now. Right, before everything was due to line up, I've refitted the crankshaft pin. And I'm now going to turn this until it gets onto its stop. And actually, that's it. We're on its stop now. So hopefully our camshaft setting bar should slot into the back of the camshafts. And that is as good as it's going to get. So there. Perfectly in. Now we know our timing is lined up nicely. I'm going to remove this timing pin and the little 10mm bolt, and there's a washer on it as well, so make sure that's still on it. And then refit that back in the block. It's 10mm, and tighten that up. So there we go, one Cambelt fitted, new tensioner and new engine water pump. I'm going to get on now and put the rocker cover back on. I will say, if you're doing this job, for what it costs, I would replace that rubber gasket because they do get flattened, and when they get flat and brittle, the oil just streams past them, and you can end up with a case where you get loads of oil sitting around your spark plugs because it leaks through here, and it also leaks out the back of these gaskets all down the back of the engine, so it can make quite a mess. So for what 10-20 quid where it's a new gasket, it's well worth replacing. And one last thing I was going to say, which I probably should have said earlier, this actual mount here that the alternator bolts onto, there's 2 studs. If you take this one out, then you can get this top cover off nice and easy. But with this stud in place, you won't be able to get the top cover off. So it just makes life, a lot easier. One of the main things I wanted to show here was how to get the coolant in this coolant bottle and through the engine and get the air out, so there's no air pockets in the engine that's going to cause any overheating issues when you come to running it up. So if I put some coolant inside this bottle and this is where the bottle normally sits. So I'll wait for that to come up to its maximum mark. Okay, you see where the coolant is right here on the maximum. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to lift the bottle up in the air. I'll take that funnel out of the way. I'm going to lift the bottle up. You can hear it draining now, you can hear it going down. Now I'm holding it higher than the actual engine is. So if I didn't do that, if I didn't lift this bottle up here, the coolant would have stayed on the maximum, chances are. And when you come to running the engine up, you could have had a little bit of a problem. You might have had an air pocket in the engine, and it might sort of like, it could well blow the water out the top of the bottle. So you can see how much water's gone down now. So that's how you get the air out of the system. So I'll put that back and I'll fill it up again. And there we go. I'll hold it up once more. Normally after you've held it up just once and it empties the bottle, that'll be it. It's got rid of all the air it needs to get rid of. But that's all you do. And that's it. Now I can fix our bottle back where it's supposed to be there. And I can pretty much guarantee if I run the engine up, it won't overflow and it won't cause no issues. And the heater will start to heat up straight away. Well, we are all back together, so all I need to do is start the engine up. In fact, there's the old Cambelt. Look at that. The thing I do suggest you do is put your heater fan on blower number 1 or number 2, whatever suits you, and put your heater controls all the way round to hot, because when you start the engine up, the first thing you want is for the actual heater to get warm. So if you put the distribution onto your face vents, so now we'll soon know if these start to warm up. That way, put it this way, once warm air starts coming through the heater vents, we know that the water is circulated through the heater matrix. Anyway, let's spark this up. I have replaced the oil filter as well, so that's why the oil light has taken a little while to come out. So that's basically it. You'll see a few air bubbles coming up through there as they come out of the engine. But now that we've lifted that bottle in the air and we've got the air out of the system, you should be able to just run this engine up and you'll have no issues with the cooling system. That should just bleed straight through and warm up properly. I'll just hold the revs up a little bit. I'll soon know if the hot air is coming through. Yeah, almost, you know, already, it's only been running a minute or so, and I can feel warm air coming through that heat vent. Once the engine is heated up properly, and your actual thermostat is down behind the power steering reservoir, so it's the actual hose that gets hot down there is hard to actually get your hand on to tell if it's open. You can use one of them like little thermostats that you can put a laser on to get the temperature if you've got one. But apart from that, you can sort of like get your hand down there and feel the hose, although it's a little bit tricky. Once all the hoses are properly hot and the water circulated properly, switch the engine off and let it sit for a few hours, and you'll probably find that the actual level will drop a little bit. Then you can top it up, put the cap back on, and that's it, done. That's all I really wanted to show, just how to get that crankshaft bolt out nice and easily without any dramas, and also lifting that coolant bottle up above the engine level, so when you put the coolant in, the coolant will go through the engine and let the air out. If you weren't to do that, like I said earlier, there's a high chance you might get some air pockets inside the engine when you're trying to bleed the coolant system, and it could cause you a few issues. But lifting that bottle up like that, it gets the air out straight away. So, and I've done this on like 6 cars now in a row, and it's worked every single time, and I've not had a single issue bleeding the coolant. So anyway, that's it for today. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you all in the next one. Adios.